How's it going, everyone? My name is Max, and today we will be looking at every single Marvel comic that was released in the second week in October in 1988. I find that the current comic books being released from the big two these days aren't really anything I'm looking for, and I find myself not as passionate or excited about the industry as I once was. Now, don't get me wrong, there are still amazing titles out there that are being published every month. You just gotta sift through some of the other crap to find them. But because of this lack of quality that I've noticed for the past 7 years, I went into some of my old back issues and began to rekindle my passion for why I got into this hobby in the first place. So when I went back and started to do some research as to what the industry looked like back in the 70s, 80s, and 90s and what books were coming out every month, I figured, hey, I've really been enjoying this. Why not share that enjoyment and excitement with y'all? It was an absolute pleasure going through and rereading some of these books from this era, so let's get a dose of nostalgia and a blast from the past by checking out the 13 books on this list released on October 11th in 1988. To start things off, we have NAMM Magazine number 7, and look at this stunning cover art by Michael Golden. The original coloring from issue 13 is actually really interesting, but I'm not sure which one I prefer more. This magazine actually reprints the original NAMM series issues 13 and 14. In issue 13, Corporal Ed Marks may be getting ready to end his tour of duty, but he's still got to go out on patrol, and while there, he witnesses the first use of the toxic defoliant Agent Orange. This issue is written by Doug Murray with art by Michael Golden and Bob Camp. In issue 14, we get a rare opportunity to see war through the eyes of the men who fight it, as a storyteller named Clark tells tales of the Vietnam War and World War II. However, that doesn't necessarily mean that things are always the way Clark tells them. This issue was also written by Doug Murray with art by Wayne Vanson and John Beatty. Next up, we have Amazing Spider-Man issue number 312, The Goblin War. This is an Inferno crossover, script by David Michelinie with art by Todd McFarlane, and cover by Todd McFarlane. This story continues from Web of Spider-Man, issue number 47. With his family in danger, the Green Goblin rides again. In order to save his family, Harry Osborn must don the Green Goblin identity once more and take on the Hobgoblin. But does Harry know what he's doing by challenging the might of the Hobgoblin? In the skies above the Osborn Chemical Company, the pumpkin bombs fly as the goblins clash. And naturally, your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man is caught in the middle. Meanwhile, the effects of the Inferno begin affecting Dr. Kurt Connors. Could an appearance from the Lethal Lizard be in the near future? This story continues in Spectacular Spider-Man, issue number 147. Harry Osborn dons the garb of the Green Goblin for the first time since Amazing Spider-Man 180. This era of ASM Comics is some of Todd's best work. How he draws the Hobgoblin is stunningly horrific and evil, and his Mary Jane is one of the most beautiful comic book characters to date. The large eyes, the full lips, curvy body, and thick, long red hair, absolutely gorgeous. It's so refreshing to get a book that has an A and a B plot, but still reads smoothly between the two and actually has them intersecting once Peter gets entangled between the battle of the goblins. It's also interesting that this takes place during the Inferno crossover because it's weaved into the fabric of the story. You read multiple characters talking about how the city is changing and moving and coming to life, which makes these scenes, set pieces, and scenarios even more bone-chillingly horrifying. Captain America issue number 350. Steve Rogers returns as Cap in Seeing Red, a 68-page giant-size issue with story by Mark Grunwald and art by Kieran Dwyer. After months of manipulation from the resurrected Red Skull, Steve Rogers is tricked into confronting his replacement as Captain America, John Walker. After the two battle it out, Steve ends up defeating Walker, and after battles his arch-nemesis, the Red Skull. In the process, the Skull, who is now in a cloned body of Steve Rogers complete with super soldier serum, has his face permanently turned into a red shrunken mask, courtesy of his exposure to his notorious dust of death. The skull once again escapes capture, but at the end of this story, Steve Rogers assumes the mantle of Captain America once again. This issue also includes a backup story titled Resurrection, with story by Mark Grunwald and art by the great John Byrne. I think one of my favorite parts about this giant-sized comic was the dynamic and intense battle scene between Rogers and Walker. I mean, this thing lasts for like 10 pages straight in a row. You're lucky to find one page of action in a current Marvel comic. The last page of this book is fantastic as well. Steve back in his classic suit, standing strong and proud as the Sentinel of Liberty, the Star-Spangled Avenger, the living legend, Captain America. I also love the 6 pages of pinups that feature Captain America's past and present partners, like Falcon, Rick Jones, Nomad, Demolition Man, and of course, Bucky Barnes. And we also get to see all of the influential women in Steve Rogers' life, like Peggy and Sharon Carter, Holly Ridley, and the Viper, just to name a few. And finally, the 5 other men who have donned the title of Captain America and the different uniforms they wore throughout the years. The art on these pages is done by John Buscema, Al Milgrom, Ron Frenz, Joe Sinnott, and Tom Morgan. Savage Sword of Conan, issue number 156. Conan seeks revenge in Rogue's Honor. This book is by Chuck Dixon, Mike Dougherty, and Ricardo Villegren. This issue also features the bold and savage pinups of Dave Simmons and an excellently painted Joe Jusko cover. When an attempt to steal a powerful Corinthian lord's treasure goes afoul, Conan and his band of thieves have a falling out over a beautiful hostage, which leads Conan to seek vengeance against those who were his partners. This also features swords and scrolls as well. This is a classic tale of vengeance, and Chuck Dixon does a great job of showcasing Conan's savagery and his physical prowess, but also his integrity and his moral code by which he lives by. Conan is by no means a virtuous character, but he still has a line that he won't cross and stays true to his convictions. Unfortunately, the art lacks the same punch that Barry Windsor Smith or John Buscema bring to the Conan books, but it's still well done and has a very classic sword and sorcery vibe to it. The deaths in this were absolutely brutal and, well, no pun intended, savage. And the pinups at the end of the book by Dave Simmons were great. Wolverine, issue number 4, Bloodsport, written by Chris Claremont, and art and cover by John Buscema and Al Williamson. In this issue, Wolverine utilizes his identity as Patch to investigate a crime scene to lock on to the scent of a murder by the hands of 2 criminals who we find out later are Bloodsport and Roughhouse. Later, Wolverine's friend Tiger, head of Madripoor's crime scene, is confronted by both Roughhouse and Bloodsport, and Wolverine has to protect her from their evil and vicious attacks. But unfortunately, he lets his berserker rage get the better of him and makes too many mistakes. But will those mistakes ultimately lead to Tiger's death at the hands of these villains? I'm not a huge fan of the colors in this book, but they really do display just how dark, grimy, and gritty Madripoor is. The tone here is totally different than what you would expect from a normal X-Men book, because the first half of this book plays out almost like a noir-type story. It's actually pretty rad to see Wolverine's persona as Patch, and how he uses it as a front for detective work. Ultimately, this wasn't my favorite issue of this Wolverine series, and this may sound odd, but the artwork of Barry Windsor Smith's Wolverine on the back cover of this book may have actually been my favorite part of this entire issue. New Mutants number 72. This issue read like a freaking fever dream. This is part 2 of 3 in the Inferno crossover and was also a crossover with Exterminators issue number 4. The story, titled Demon Reign, is written by Louise Simonson with pencils by Brett Blevins and inks by Al Williamson. To summarize this comic in just a few sentences, Nazturth and Sim battle over Magic, who has taken on the form of a demon, and Sim infects Naztur with the Transmode virus. The subplot follows the New Mutants teaming up with the Exterminators to save 10 babies that Naztor is using in an arcane spell to keep his door to Limbo open. The book ends with Magik being confronted by Naztor once more as she submits to the temptation of using her soul sword against him, which transforms her into a silver armored form. I know, the issue is as wild as it sounds. DP7 issue number 28, The Candidate. Story by Mark Grunwald with art by Paul Ryan and Danny Bulinati. It's the guys versus the girls as an enemy from DP7's past sets the women on the team against the men. Can Mastodon and Antibody stop their friends without hurting them? Plus, what is Voight's ultimate goal, and what will it mean for the future of the country? So to be completely honest, I had never heard of this book before, or this title before, but after looking these up, so after doing a bit of research, I found that the title actually stands for Displaced Paranormals, and refers to the 7 main characters of the series. All of them received superhuman powers as a result of the stellar phenomenon known as the White Event. The premise behind the White Event and the New Universe line of comics was that prior to July 1986, this new universe was identical to the real world. Its first divergence from normal reality, however, was the White Event, a strange astronomical phenomenon that bathed the Earth in a bright white light and caused genetic anomalies in 2 out of every 1 million humans, which led to their developing superhuman powers. Human beings who developed a reaction to the White Event were then referred to as paranormals, hence Displaced Paranormals DP7. Alpha Flight issue number 67, and check out this gorgeous cover by Jim Lee. This was part 1 of a 4-part story arc titled Wrath of the Dream Queen. This particular issue story is called The Ties That Bind, written by James D. Hudnall with art by Hugh Haynes. The Dream Queen is back, and hell hath no fury like this woman scorned. Plus, we get the origin of the Dream Queen and how she is revealed to be the daughter of a succubus and the demon Nightmare, the dreaded ruler of a pocket dimension. Dream Queen wants to leave her prison dimension and enter the realm of man so she could overtake it, and has made a plan to do so by using Alpha Flight as a conduit and portal for her to pass through. But will she succeed? Solo Avengers issue number 15, Hawkeye and Black Widow in The Awesome Android, by Tom DeFalco and Al Milgrom. The Avengers, Ace, Archer, and the Black Widow join forces to battle the awesome attack android of AIM. Ronin on Empty by Fabian Nicieza and art by Tom Morgan and Mark McKenna have Stain International has rebuilt Red Ronin after the robot's destruction at the hands of the Earth's mightiest heroes in Avengers issue 199. Now, the giant robot is on display at an electronics trade show that also features an exhibit from Van Dyne Industries. Can the Wasp stop Red Ronin all by herself this time? Sergio Aragone's Gru the Wanderer, issue number 48. This book features the humorous misadventures of the mighty, physically but not so great mentally, warrior named Gru. In this title, The Wanderer, Gru, fed up with how everyone reacts to him, journeys far to seek a land where his reputation does not precede him. Story and art credits both go to Sergio Aragones. St. George issue number 4, cover art by Mark Chiarello, written by DJ Chichester and Margaret Clark, with art by Klaus Janson and John Beatty. A town in the Carolinas has a sinister deal with the Shadow Dweller. He'll ensure that they have a good harvest in return for human sacrifices. Can Michael Devlin halt this ghastly bargain in time? Heathcliff issue number 30. This is the comic book version of the popular comic strip cat Heathcliff. In this issue, Heathcliff and Iggy visit a wax museum and discover some strange things going on there in Mystery of the Wax Museum. Script by Howard Post and art by Howard Post and Roberta Edelman. Then in Follow the Eater, Heathcliff goes to great lengths to be able to dine at the Golden Guppy restaurant. Script by Angelo DeCesar and art by Warren Kramer and Jacqueline Rodicher. And finally, Alf, issue number 12. This is the comic book version of the TV sitcom and cartoon that aired on NBC from 1986 to 1990, featuring an alien life form, Alf, living with a family. Alf hits his head and doesn't know who he is, nor does he recognize the Tanners in No Thanks to the Memories. Then, Alf tells Willie about his famous ancestor from Melmac's pioneer days in A Town Without Kitties. And in Hair We Grow Again, Alf helps Lynn with her hair, and that results in a problem. Scripts by Michael Gallagher and art by Dave Manek and Marie Severin. Well, there you have it. That was every single Marvel comic that was released on October 11th in 1988. I think my favorites would have to be the Captain America book, the ASM book, and then the Wolverine being my last one, and probably my honorable mention being the Conan book by Chuck Dixon. But yeah, that was probably my top 3 or 4. But what did you guys think? Let me know in the comment section below. Do you guys remember picking any of these books right off the shelf? What were some of your favorites that y'all remember? Let me know once again in the comment section below. Thank you guys so much for watching, and as always, I will see you guys in the next video.